Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, hello. If you are returning, welcome back. Thank you so much for sticking around. I really appreciate you. So today's video is going to be a little bit different than the things that I usually talk about on my channel as of recent anyway. I definitely have talked about my own mental health and everything in the past, but I really wanted to make this video because it pertains to stuff I've talked about on my channel before, just alluded to in videos. It pertains to me getting medical help for weight loss again. It pertains to a lot of things. So I just wanted to make this video to keep everybody in the loop, and also because I think it's a really important thing to talk about, because like the title says, more or less I was put on diet pills, prescription weight loss medication, and all I got was an OCD diagnosis. That's not all I got. I've lost like a little over 10 pounds too, but that is like one of the major things to come out of me being put on prescription weight loss medication for the first time in my life. But I also wanted to talk about it because I think OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, is one of the most misunderstood mental illnesses out there. And so I just really wanted to talk about my own experiences, what I've learned with it, and everything like that. So yeah, let's just get into it. So, like I said, I have officially been diagnosed with OCD, or obsessive compulsive disorder. I feel like a lot of people do on social media. I'm not wearing this as like a badge of honor or like whatever. It has been comforting to me to get like an answer or a reason as to why my brain works the way that I've known it works ever since I was little. Because for a really long time, I was always just labeled like, oh, Megan, you're just a worrywart or whatever. And I also have been diagnosed with depression and anxiety ever since, like for over a decade. And so I always thought that it was just like my anxiety, really bad anxiety, but it's not. It's more than that. I do think that OCD is one of the most misunderstood mental illnesses on the market, and so I just wanted to talk about it, not wearing it as a badge of honor or like whatever. And the other reason I wanted to talk about it is because in previous videos, specifically like recent videos, I have talked about how I thought I had undiagnosed ADHD and how I was kind of working towards getting a diagnosis. And I do not have ADHD, but from what I've learned, ADHD and OCD are often kind of like, I don't want to say confused with each other in terms of like symptoms, but like OCD can cause ADHD like symptoms. And so I'm going to talk about that when I talk about my psych appointment that I had like a couple weeks ago. But right now I want to talk about kind of like my backstory and like how I have functioned up until this point that led me to kind of going to a psychiatrist in the first place. Like my whole life, like I said, I've always been labeled like a worrywart. I've always been a very anxious person. And this is like ever since I can remember. Like when I was a kid, I would constantly be in my head. And the idea that somebody could just like have a thought and like move on was very weird to me because I have never been like that. Ever. So yeah, the idea that like somebody could just like have a thought or like an intrusive thought like normal people do and just like move on was a very foreign concept to me. And for a really long time, I thought everybody's brain worked the same way mine did. And that is not the case. Because a big thing with the way that I have OCD is that I cannot filter out my intrusive thoughts. I will have an intrusive thought like a normal person does, which an intrusive thought is like just a completely outlandish thought that like pops into your mind. They can be very like bad or violent or whatever. And I cannot let that go. And I will ruminate on it for weeks and weeks and weeks, sometimes months. I have had horrible bouts with that many times in my life. So much so that like when I was a kid, I would like have a thought, think that I was a horrible person for having said thought because I knew that this thought was not reflective of like who I was as a person, and what I would like really do or whatever. But my brain would not let it go, and it'd be like, hey,
Megan, you're a horrible person for thinking this thing over and over and over again.
And my like compulsion, I guess, for a really long time was to talk about it with somebody. And so I would have just like, I would have one thought, ruminate, talk to my mom usually about it. And then I would feel some sort of reprieve for like a bit, and then I'd have another one, and then it would just all happen again. And it got to the point where I would be like, okay, that one's like done and out, and like I've talked about it. When's the next one gonna be? And this was like a recurring cycle in my life for a really long time, especially when I was a kid. And it was always just kind of chalked up to anxiety and whatever. But then I moved out on my own, and I was not only just responsible for schoolwork, I was responsible for earning my income and paying for my life and keeping up with my apartment and taking care of myself and everything else. And I was doing good. I had a really good routine in place, which was like part of why I was doing well, I think. Then, the world fell apart and we were forced to stay inside. And my routine was severely disrupted by this, and I don't think I realized just how bad it was until like a little while later, but it was severely impacted by this. And because my routine was impacted by it, so was everything else about the way that I functioned. And at the time, I was dating somebody. I was in my first like very long-term relationship, and that was also another thing that led me to believe that maybe something else is afoot, because I could not think about my relationship the way like a quote-unquote normal person can think about their relationship. It was to the point where like I thought someone else besides my partner was attractive, that like, oh, Megan, you're not in love with like your person anymore because you thought this person was attractive. And like I would just think about it and think about it and think about it. Or like if my partner did something that like kind of rubbed me the wrong way, I would just be like, well, that's it, Megan, they're not the one for you, blah blah blah. And it caused me to abruptly end said relationship multiple times when I did not want to. And me ending the relationship was a compulsion, I now know in hindsight, and it was to make these weird ruminations, these obsessive ruminations, just subside for a while. And it would really only work for like maybe 12 hours, and that's like the longest it kind of worked for, because then I'd immediately be like, what the fuck did I just do? Luckily, I had a very patient and understanding partner at the time, and that is something that I still feel horrible for doing, but I did not know that's what I was doing at the time, and it's also caused me to do just some like really shitty things also, but I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. Like I said, one of the reasons I wanted to make this video is because I have alluded in many videos to thinking that I had undiagnosed ADHD, because on top of these things, like these like obsessive thoughts or whatever, particularly when we had to stay inside for so long, I started noticing like a plethora of ADHD-like symptoms. I was having a lot of focus problems, which were new for me. I was having a lot of executive dysfunction problems, which for those of you that don't know, it's basically like a fancy word for saying procrastination. It's not just procrastination, it's that like your brain literally will not let you start a task if it's like overwhelmed by the idea of the task. At least this is my understanding. I am not a medical professional. I went to art school. But for me, a particular example that I can think of is like laundry. Laundry is the bane of my existence. And it's the bane of my existence because my current living situation, which thankfully is changing in a few weeks, I do not have in-unit laundry. So I have to go to a secondary location to do laundry. And it usually like takes up an entire day, and it's like this huge daunting thing to me for some reason. And so on days where like I know I should be doing laundry, I just don't, because my brain is essentially just like, nope, that's too much for me to process right now. We're not gonna do that. And so laundry has always been like the hardest chore for me to keep up with because it is kind of a big task for my brain to like comprehend. So that's like a good example I can give about like my executive dysfunction problems. Another one is like I have to do reports at work, and like once a quarter, and it's not like a hard task, but it's really monotonous and tedious and takes a while. And so like forcing myself to get over that hump of like my brain being overwhelmed by the idea of starting it is really hard. And so yeah, so I was starting to notice a lot of things like that, and it was starting to affect my work. Things were starting to affect my relationships, my friendships, because I also was like just really bad at like keeping my schedule organized and on top of it, and just kind of like a brief overview of my experience with that. But I was having a lot of ADHD like symptoms from what I had been learning through independent research and just talking to other people about their experiences. And yeah, so that's why I always said that I thought I had undiagnosed ADHD. And I was always under the impression as well that like I thought maybe I had ADHD and OCD. Like I thought I had both, because I knew that like the ruminations were not normal, and I knew that like my troubles starting tasks and my focus issues were also like not quote unquote normal. And also the way I would like hyperfixate on certain things was also not normal. And one thing I learned about ADHD was that a lot of women in particular are misdiagnosed or underdiagnosed with ADHD because you're typically diagnosed as a child. And the way that young girls present ADHD typically is a lot different than the way that young boys present with ADHD in school. And there's just not as much research on girls with ADHD, like young girls with ADHD. And so we're seeing a big influx of adult women being finally diagnosed, because a lot of times, from what I understand, the girls, they're not hyperactive outwardly, they're more hyperactive internally. And that is like one of the best ways I can explain my life, just in general, in school, in work, and everything. I could not, the way I worried and the way I focused on things was never and has never been normal. I distinctly remember like a time when I was doing a show in high school, I was worried that like I didn't do something before I left that night. Like I did stage crew, and I was afraid I didn't like put things away correctly. And my parents kept trying to tell me that like, Meg, if you didn't do that, not a big deal, it's gonna be okay. For me, it was literally like a life or death situation. And it caused me to have like a panic attack to the point where I got nauseous. And it was like a very mundane thing that I was worried about. But like the way that my brain works, I can't just worry or like be nervous about something. It's like a whole thing, and it turns into like a full body situation. I thought that I had both ADHD and OCD. But I was leaning more towards ADHD at the time, because the whole internal hyperactivity was something that I really resonated with, which that turns out they were just ruminations and like obsessive and OCD ruminations and whatever. Fast forward to like now, I had already seen a psychiatrist nurse practitioner, and she basically told me that like I didn't have ADHD because I wasn't a problem in school. And I was like, okay, but I'm also having all of these other symptoms. And so she gave me like a take-home test kind of thing for adult ADHD, and I passed it with flying colors, in that like I was only supposed to check like 4 boxes, and I checked 12, baby. And so I sent her my results, and I didn't know that I was only supposed to check 4 boxes, by the way. So like I was answering the questions, and yeah. And so I sent her my results, and she was like, I still don't think you have ADHD. Here's like a meditation app that's good for calming your brain, and like here's a good focus tool that's good for like practicing focus. And I was like, sweet, thanks for nothing. So I kind of just went with it. And then I was having, and I talked about this in a video before, that I was having a lot of problems staying on track with my weight loss, and that I was going to be asking for help here pretty soon because I had a physical with my doctor. And so I had a physical with my doctor, and I was like, hey, I need help again. Like, I'm not totally turned off by the idea of weight loss medication, and I'd be willing to try that. And so she put me on phentermine, which is a stimulant. It is an amphetamine. And I was honestly like very nervous about starting this because I'd never been on a stimulant before ever in my life. And I'd done a lot of research on it like prior to putting it in my mouth. And I was fully expecting to have like the zoomies, to have a lot of extra energy and like all this stuff that I like didn't know what to do with, and that my anxiety might get worse and all of this stuff. And because I had just read like people's side effects with it, but I'd also seen people being like, I have like untreated ADHD, so it made me just kind of like function normally, like a normal person would. So it could have gone either way for me, to be honest. And even on a half dose, first day I took it, my brain just shut off, like in a good way. I didn't realize how much chaos there was in my brain going on at all times, but it was kind of just like turning a radio down in my noggin, and like I could think straight. The big thing I noticed was my impulse control existed. I have always had issues with impulse control, be it snacking, be it buying things, be it like anything that involves, the only thing I haven't had an issue with is like substances, you know? It's mainly been like food and buying stuff that I have had big impulse control issues with. And I always thought that was just kind of like a me thing and that I was just gonna have to like learn to deal with it. But when I started taking this medication, I felt, for lack of a better term, normal. And I was not snacking as much, and it wasn't just because the phentermine like suppressed my appetite. I was not snacking as much. I was not impulsively ordering food as much. I was not impulsively buying things online as much. The big thing I noticed is that I was just able to be happy in the relationship that I am in currently. And I started phentermine in about February. For the first couple days, I was feeling a little zoomy, but I was also feeling like I was able to just sit down and focus on work, that I was able to be present in my relationship, and that I was not impulsively making decisions. And overall, my brain was just a lot quieter. And so I was like, all right, Megan, something is afoot. And so during my initial doctor's appointment, where she prescribed me this, she also gave me a referral to like an actual psychiatrist, not a nurse practitioner. Not saying nurse practitioners are not good. It's just I wanted to see like an actual psychiatrist because I've never honestly seen one before. I just got diagnosed with depression and anxiety with my psychologist's help and then my GP's help, basically. And also like I knew like that's what was going on. Like I've talked about it before on my channel. So yeah, so I knew I wanted to see an actual psychiatrist. And so that appointment was gonna be, I think, like a month after I had started the phentermine. Like in the first month of taking phentermine, I lost 10 pounds, and it wasn't me changing anything about my diet, really. Like, I mean, I obviously started eating more at home and like eating healthier just like by default because I was eating at home. My portions did go down, and it was honestly, I felt like I was like a year post-op, like post weight loss surgery. Because for those of you that don't know, I had weight loss surgery 5 years ago. It felt like I was like a year post-op. And so I have a lot of thoughts and feelings on how flippantly these medications are just given out to people. And I'm thinking about making a whole video on that, but I do think that like my experience on this was a lot different than like a quote unquote normal person's would be, because I had like underlying stuff going on. But I can still talk about like that first initial week, because that was like kind of jarring with just like how my appetite changed and how much I could eat changed and like all that kind of stuff. So I could talk about that, and I do have a lot of thoughts and feelings on how phentermine is just so flippantly prescribed to people with little to no supervision. So I can do that video. This is kind of just like an overall kind of thing. And I really only have lost like, not only, but I have only lost like a little over 10 pounds in the 3 months that I've been on it, because May is my last month on it, because you're only supposed to be on it like 3 to 5 months, like max, I think. But that's because starting in March and April, like life just like slapped me in the face in terms of like my health, not having anything to do with the medication, just my health, my partner's health, like life just slapped us in the face for the last couple months, and I have not been well enough to go to the gym like at all. And I know that if I would have implemented exercise, I would have lost more. But one of the things it helped me do was it helped me create an eating routine again, because I wasn't just like impulsively snacking. It helped me get on a regimen again. But yeah, so my doctor prescribed me phentermine. I was on it for like a month, and then I finally met with the psychiatrist, and this guy is amazing. I love him. He listens, and then he just gives his thoughts, and like that's all I wanted. And so I just laid everything out on the table. Like I laid out even some of the worst experiences I have had with what I now know as OCD, that like only a handful of people in my life know about. And I just told him everything, because I was like, I am over feeling like this. And I did tell him too that I started phentermine for weight loss, and I have noticed a significant improvement in how my like just overall cognitive function is, or has been. And so basically he told me that I absolutely meet the criteria for OCD, like absolutely, like without a doubt, that is something that we should definitely move forward with treating, because you definitely meet the diagnostic criteria for that. He said, however, I don't think you meet the diagnostic criteria for ADHD, but it is really common for people with OCD to think that they either only have ADHD or also have ADHD, because OCD and ADHD come from the same part of the brain. And so basically what happens is like the obsessive like ruminations and thoughts and whatever, they like wear out your frontal lobe. And so then when your brain is tired, you just like shut down. Like, and I get overstimulated really easily too. Like if I am around stimulation that is like unpleasant to me for a long period of time, I will just shut down. Sometimes I will just not talk. Sometimes and Avery is amazing about this, I'll just be like, I need like no talkie time for like an hour, or I'll just like go into our bedroom by myself and just like hang out by myself. And I've always been that way. And so he's like, yeah, the overstimulation, the focus issues, the executive dysfunction issues all come from basically your frontal lobe being worn out from the hyperactivity, the obsessive ruminations in your brain. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense. This is why they pay you the big bucks. So, and hearing that honestly was like really, really comforting for me. Like getting this diagnosis is like not anything I'm like necessarily happy about. I think I kind of always knew that it was coming. Even my parents, when I told them, like my mom was like, I'm not surprised. And I was like, yeah, me neither. It was really comforting to finally get an answer as to why my brain works the way it does. And to also have some validation that like the really bad bouts with this that I've had throughout the course of my life were really just due to this, and not because I'm like an awful person. And it's and that kind of like leads me into the big reason why I'm making this video, is because I really think that OCD is one of the most misunderstood mental illnesses out there. I want to say that it has like the highest, if not like one of the highest unaliving rates of any mental thing that exists, because it can be so insufferable at times. And I would be lying if I said I was not almost pushed to that point like at least once or twice in my life, because of during times where I was having really, really bad I guess episodes, for lack of a better term. I think OCD is always branded as like oh, you're just really clean, or oh, you just are really organized, or like you have to have things a certain way or whatever, when like nobody realizes. And for some reason, before I even got this diagnosis, I just want to say people saying like, oh, I'm really OCD about this has always driven me insane, because like I just knew that that's not what that meant. And so like people will use it saying that like, they're really particular about how they organize something, or they're really particular about how they clean something, which like, yes, I am, but it has more to do with like routine in my brain, and like routines that I have to do to feel like things are done correctly. And that is something that I am actively working on. Because especially now that I live with my partner, and that's, yeah. So for me, I've never really had like a particular phobia like some people do, because like germophobia is often associated with OCD. I've never really had that. For me, it's basically the inability to filter out and let go of intrusive thoughts, and to let my brain just like obsess over an intrusive thought that I had and convince me that like I am a horrible person. Because a lot of times too, I've learned that intrusive thoughts can kind of latch on to things that like you really care about. Like in reality, you really care about these things, and you're really protective of these things, and you love these things and whatever, but your brain kind of like flips it. That's what I've learned anyways. And so it's really, really jarring when your brain cannot let you stop thinking about like this intrusive thought that you had, thinking negatively about something that you love. And that is my experiences with OCD. And that's like, yeah. And so I think OCD is like a very, very misunderstood mental illness, because yeah, it's like the cleaning disease. It's the organized mental illness. It's whatever. But what a lot of people don't realize, and this is just me speaking about what I've learned, and from conversations I've had with other people who have it, those like cleaning things are compulsions for things that are going on in that person's brain. And so like, it's not just like, oh, I have to like clean this thing really well, or oh, I have to clean, or I have to flip this light switch 3 times because that's just what feels right. It's like, for a lot of people, it's like, I have to flip this thing just right, or I have to flip this light switch so many times, or else like my mom's gonna die on Tuesday. Like they're having this obsession about like the fate of their mother, and they think the only way to get that to stop is by creating some sort of order or doing something so many times. It is such a mental thing, and the physical compulsions are more so associated with it, when really it is all up here. Like it is all up in this noodle. And my physical compulsions that I've noticed have just been making really rash decisions, and I have hurt quite a few people in my life with those rash decisions to make my brain shut up for like 2 minutes. And I've apologized to my ex because I felt awful about some of the things that I did, and it's a big thing. Like, it's an explanation, not an excuse. And so like, I have just explained, like, I've learned some things about myself, and like, this is why I think I did this, but that doesn't make it okay. And so I'm in my apology era. It just really hurts me because I take great pride in being a kind person and caring for other people's feelings, sometimes more than my own. But sometimes, just to make my brain like stop for like 2 seconds, I've done some really unkind and inconsiderate things. And mainly I've said some unkind and inconsiderate things to people. And it's not cool. And so I'm very much in my apology era. And it's helping me heal a lot to do that. Me and my ex had like a really good conversation about it, and like it was really nice. And also it's helped me understand a lot of the financial decisions I have made in my young adult life, because good God, have I made some fucking stupid decisions. and I'm paying for them now. And I'm paying off a considerable amount of credit card debt, which I have a plan for, and like everything's fine now. It's been okay for a while, but like, good Lord, was I making some very rash financial decisions. And also it makes me kind of wonder, like, if this would have been caught earlier and I was properly treated for it, would I have even needed weight loss surgery? Like, obviously my food choices were my own choices and my own decisions, but like, for me, it was always just a matter of like impulsively eating that, like, oh, I'm like kind of hungry, so I'm just gonna eat this. Like, it's really hard to explain, and I know it probably sounds like kind of dumb to people who don't get it, but like the impulse control thing has been a huge thing for me. And I do think when you get a diagnosis like this, that there is some aspect of grieving almost, or like, I've been very depressed, honestly, since I got my diagnosis, because it's made me like have a lot of time to reflect on things that happened when I was younger that like really impacted me, or just like behaviors that I exhibited when I was younger that like were not great and like caused me a lot of stress, but like nobody knew that like this was even a thing, because again, OCD is the clean people disease. It's not the obsessive anxiety ridden like to the max disease. And like, yeah, I've been like having a lot of retrospective or like introspective moments with myself, and it's been hard, but it's been really good. And I'm also like still obviously in therapy, and so we've already kind of been working on it before I got my official diagnosis, but now that we know that this is like a thing, that it's something that we need to talk about a lot more, and we need to work on a lot more. And I need to remember that like I am just a human navigating through life, and I make mistakes like everybody else, and that's okay. And that I don't have to be perfect, and I don't like, and that I'm not always gonna be considerate of people's feelings when I need to do things, and like, but that's just a human thing. But for me, it's like when I'm like that, it's like awful for me. Like, I feel like garbage. And so it's a lot. And a lot of it is just kind of learning to live and let live a little bit more than I have been able to in the past. And yeah, and for me, talking about how I'm feeling, or talking about maybe thoughts that I've experienced, like with my therapist and maybe with my partner or whatever, is really important now. And my girlfriend has been just like, she's been great. Like, I'll just start talking and I'll just be like, blah, 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 and she'll just listen. And it's really, really nice to have someone like that in my life. I was not expecting to get emotional in this video, because it's been something that I knew was coming for a long time. But yeah, I just really don't think that people fully understand what OCD is and the amount of internal turmoil it can cause for people who have it, or it does cause for people who have it, because holy crap, it is not fun. So yeah, so what we're doing now in terms of my treatment is I am stopping phentermine actually on like Wednesday. I have my doctor's appointment, I don't know when I'm stopping it this month sometime. But then I'm already kind of adjusting the medication I've been on already for my depression and anxiety. And then I am gonna start like a stimulant that I'm gonna be on for the foreseeable future. It's basically Adderall, but like not Adderall. And we're gonna start there, because I have not, as like emotional of an experience as this diagnosis has been for me so far, my brain has never felt as quote unquote normal ever as it has in the time that I have been on phentermine. And it is a relief like I can't explain the amount of relief I have felt. And I will probably, if I need to, explore different kinds of therapy, because there are a lot of different kinds of therapy to treat OCD. But for right now, I'm just working with my therapist that I've had for like the last couple years. She's amazing. I love her so much. And yeah. And so it's just a lot of kind of retroactively working through things that have happened in my past, how to prevent those things from happening again in the future, and tweaking medication, because I know a lot of people have a lot of strong opinions on medication, specifically stimulants, but I don't care. It makes me trust my thoughts. And that is the best way I can think about it, because if OCD does one thing, it makes you feel like you cannot trust your own brain a lot of the time, and that fucking sucks. So yeah, I think that's all I wanted to cover in this video. Yeah, thanks for listening. Let me know if you want my full opinions on phentermine below, even though like it honestly just kind of became like an OCD medication for me and not a weight loss medication. My psychiatrist did say that that is a very common experience for people with OCD who go on stimulants for the first time. Like what I felt is very, very common. So that also led him to believe that like, yeah, something is afoot. Like on top of the novel that I just like dumped on him about my entire life. But yeah, let me know if you want that video, because I do have thoughts and feelings based on like my initial like maybe a few weeks to a month experience on phentermine outside of my brain shutting off. There were some very kind of like jarring side effects from it, and I started seeing people like I started seeing like weight loss clinics on Groupon offering a phentermine, offering an Adipex prescription, and I was like, that's not good. So yeah, let me know if you want that video, because I definitely have thoughts and opinions. Thank you so much for watching this one in particular. If you made it this far, leave just like cute emojis. I don't know, like animals, hearts, cats, whatever you feel is cute, leave it down below, because I need some cute stuff in my life right now, and I think we all could use that. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. Be kind to yourself, be kind to others, drink your water, take your meds, and I will see you in the next one. Okay, bye.